The air was thick with the scent of fear and stale whiskey. It clung to the velvet curtains and the rough, splintered floor of the makeshift stage I was standing on. My hands were tied, not with rope but with cold, silver chains that felt heavy enough to anchor a ship. This wasn't supposed to be my life. Just a week ago I was Adeline Hayes, the beta daughter respected if not fully loved in the Moonstone Pack. Now I was a product, a shame displayed for judgment. The man holding my chain, Gideon Thorne, was a council enforcer. His face was a mask of cold satisfaction. He held the microphone like a trophy, his voice booming and echoing the final brutal judgment against me. "Look closely, gentlemen," he sneered, dragging me forward. The harsh spotlights blinding me felt like physical blows. "This is what happens when a mate bond is rejected by an alpha. She is tainted. She is spoiled. She is useless to her own pack." Lies. All lies, I screamed in my head, but my lips were sewn shut by terror and a lifetime of training to show no weakness. They had stripped me of my clothes, replacing them with a thin, rough shift that offered no comfort, no dignity, and no warmth against the chill of the cavernous warehouse. But they couldn't strip the memories of the day it happened. My destined alpha, the one I was supposed to love and build a future with, had stood before the entire pack and said 3 words that shattered my world and sealed my fate. "I, Tristan, reject you." He gave no reason. He needed none. His word was law. That rejection wasn't just heartbreak. It was a curse. The Moonstone Pack laws, upheld by Gideon's cruel counsel, were absolute. An unclaimed, rejected female was a sign of bad fortune, a hole in the pack's strength. I was a stain to be scrubbed out. "The beta daughter," Gideon continued, his voice dripping with false pity, "is now just property. She has been stripped of all titles and status." I felt the burning stares of the shifters in the audience, mostly brutish alphas and wealthy merchants from neighboring packs, their eyes hungry, calculating, and utterly devoid of kindness. They saw a slave, a prize, a toy. They saw anything but me. I focused on a spot of dirt on the floor. I would not cry. I would not beg. I would not let them see the depth of my despair. My mother's whispered words from years ago, "Keep your fire hidden, Adeline, until you can wield it as a weapon," were my only shield. "The bidding will begin at 5,000, Gideon announced, his voice snapping me back to the present horror. "A meager price for one who will serve your every need. A price for a lifetime of obedience." The number started climbing. $5,000. $10,000. The voices were low, guttural, and casual, discussing the sale of my soul as if they were haggling over a used car. My stomach churned with every increase. Being sold meant a life of forced servitude, likely to the most ruthless alpha in the room, one who would delight in breaking my spirit. A massive, scarred man from the Ironclaw Pack, Alpha Damon, stood up, his booming voice shaking the wooden stage. 50,000. She's broken but she's young. I'll take her. A wave of dread washed over me. Damon was known for his sadistic pleasure in dominating his slaves. I closed my eyes, picturing the cold, dark cabin where I would spend the rest of my miserable days. Please, anyone but him. Please, Moon Goddess, anything but that. Gideon smiled, a predator's grin. Do I hear 60? 50,000 going once. Just as I prepared to let my carefully constructed walls crumble, a single deep voice cut through the clamor like a thunderclap. It was a voice that commanded immediate, absolute silence. 100,000. The entire warehouse went silent. Every head snapped toward the back of the room. Gideon's triumphant grin faltered. Even Alpha Damon looked stunned. A man stepped out of the shadows. He was a mountain of a person, taller, broader, and more imposing than any other shifter in the room. He wore a heavy, dark coat despite the warmth, and a hood partially obscured his face, but his presence alone was a physical weight. He carried the undisputed aura of an alpha, yet he wore no pack symbol. This was a rogue. A ghost. A myth. Silas Vance. His name was whispered in hushed, terrified tones throughout the room. He was the most notorious, the most dangerous, and the most feared alpha in the territory, one who lived entirely outside the council's jurisdiction. His eyes, dark and chillingly intense, finally landed on me. They weren't hungry like the others. They were cold, distant, and assessing, like a wolf looking at a rabbit it was about to dispatch with swift, surgical precision. 100,000, he repeated, his voice low and gritty, confirming the price. He didn't look at Gideon. He didn't look at Alpha Damon. He looked only at me. Then he doubled it. 200,000. And the sale must be immediate. The crowd gasped. 200,000 for a disgraced, rejected Omega? It was an absurd, terrifying amount. Gideon, greed overriding his fear, quickly pounded the gavel. Sold. 200,000 to the rogue Alpha. He forced a nervous laugh. Congratulations on your purchase, Alpha Vance. Silas didn't move. He simply stared, then reached a powerful hand inside his coat and tossed a satchel heavy with cash onto the stage. It landed with a dull, sickening thud. Unchain her, he ordered, his eyes never leaving mine. She is mine. Gideon, though clearly uneasy, rushed to obey. The click of the silver chains falling away was the sound of my life shattering and reforming into something dark and unknown. The rogue Alpha stepped onto the stage. His massive frame blocked out the light, casting me entirely in his shadow. He didn't speak another word to me, didn't touch me, but simply jerked his chin toward the exit. My fear was overwhelming, a cold ocean rising around my throat. I had been saved from one monster, only to be claimed by one infinitely more terrifying. As I followed the silent, dominant figure of Silas Vance out of the auction house and into the cold night, I knew one thing. My life of servitude had just begun, but the stakes were higher than ever before. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and how's the weather where you are today? Don't forget to like and subscribe and turn on that notification bell so you don't miss our next interesting story. The door slammed shut behind us, cutting off the last vestiges of the auction house. The stench of sweat, the whispered judgments, and the metallic clink of the chains. The cold night air of the city hit me, a blessed sharp shock that made me shiver, but not just from the temperature. I shivered because I was walking beside a monster, and I had no idea if he was taking me to freedom or a quicker, darker doom. Silas Vance didn't walk, he strode, a force of nature moving through the alleyway. His boots crunched on the loose gravel. The immense breadth of his shoulders, even beneath the dark coat, radiated a sheer, untouchable power. I had to almost jog to keep up, my bare feet slapping softly against the rough concrete. He hadn't spoken another word since the auction stage. Not a command, not a question, not even a curse. His silence was heavier than any shout. It felt like a trap being slowly set. Where are we going? What do you want? The questions screamed in my mind, but I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted copper, refusing to voice them. They had taught me one lesson well in the Moonstone Pack: show no weakness. If I spoke, it would be a plea and I would not beg. Finally, he stopped beside a massive black truck, one that looked built for speed and rough terrain. It was intimidating, just like him. He opened the passenger door and the interior light flickered on. The momentary brightness highlighted the harsh, angular lines of his face. A square jaw, high cheekbones, and an expression so utterly detached it was frightening. "Get in," he growled, the first words he'd spoken directly to me. His voice was low, gravelly, and held a warning. "No, please. No, be quick." Just a dominant order. I scrambled in, pulling the rough shift down uselessly over my exposed knees. The leather seat was cold, expensive, and smelled faintly of wood smoke and something primal, something wolf. He got in on his side, starting the engine with a roar that vibrated through the truck's frame. The vehicle shot out of the alley and onto the highway, swallowing the miles with terrifying speed. I risked a glance at him. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. His eyes, fixed on the road, were an impossible, piercing shade of deep gray, and they seemed to hold an infinity of cold, suppressed emotion. He wasn't focused on me, he was focused on escape. The tension in the cabin was so thick I could barely breathe. I had to know. I had to understand what I was. Servant? A prisoner? A piece of livestock? Gathering every shred of my remaining beta daughter courage, I broke the silence. Why me? My voice was a dry, reedy whisper, but in the echoing space of the truck, it sounded loud. Silas didn't look at me. He waited a full, agonizing minute, letting the roar of the tires fill the space. "The price," he finally said, his voice flat. "It was the only way to stop that pig Damon. He's volatile. He needed to be cut off. He bought me to spite someone else." My heart sank. So I wasn't special. I was a tool, a very expensive political statement, a pawn in a larger game between two powerful alphas. "And now?" I asked, pushing my luck. "What is my service?" Am I to be a housekeeper? A guard? What did you buy for $200,000, Alpha? The title tasted like ash, but I used it for respect. He finally turned his head just enough to pierce me with his gaze. You will be silent. I flinched. The look in his eyes was pure ice, but beneath the ice there was something else. A flicker of pain swiftly masked. You are nothing, he stated, the words simple and brutal, exactly as I had feared. You are an inconvenience. A necessity. You will be seen, not heard. You will obey every instruction. If you run, I will hunt you. If you disobey, I will break you. Do you understand, Adeline? He used my full name, a chilling confirmation that he knew exactly who he had purchased. Yes, Alpha, I managed, the answer automatic, hollow. The rest of the drive was a silent nightmare. We drove for hours, leaving the bright lights of the city far behind, venturing deep into the rural forested land. Every mile felt like a further separation from the life I once knew. As dawn approached, painting the sky with bruised shades of purple and orange, Silas slowed the truck. We were on a nearly invisible dirt track that wound through thick pines. The air here was sharp, clean, and wild. The track ended at a remote, heavily fortified cabin. It wasn't rustic. It was solid, built from dark stone and thick timber, blending perfectly into the wilderness. It looked less like a home and more like a high-end bunker. He killed the engine. We are here. He got out first, and the sudden quiet was deafening. I waited, not daring to move until he commanded it. He walked around the truck, pulled open my door, and stood back, his shadow falling over me. Out. I climbed out, stretching my cramped limbs. The cold bit into my skin, but I ignored it. I looked around. No neighbors. No roads. Just trees, rock, and his imposing structure. This was his lair, and I was now inside the spider's web. He pointed to a small, isolated wing of the cabin, separated from the main structure by a short, covered walkway. That is your annex. It has a bed, a bath, and food stores. You will not leave that area without my explicit permission. You will not enter the main house unless I call for you. What are my duties? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked impatient, annoyed by my necessity to speak. Survival. Yours. My. You will be a fixture. A mask. Nothing more. We are in a temporary holding pattern. He walked toward the annex door, pausing with his hand on the handle. I have not taken a mate in years. I have not shared my territory with a human for years. I don't want you. I bought you for a purpose, and I will use you until that purpose is fulfilled. Then you will leave. The word felt like a lie. Pack Law said once an Omega was bought, she was chattel for life. But I didn't press him. If there was a sliver of hope for future freedom, I would cling to it. He opened the annex door, revealing a small, starkly furnished room. It was clean, functional, and deeply depressing in its isolation. Go, he ordered. Don't speak again until tomorrow. Get some rest. You'll need it. He didn't wait for a response. As I stepped inside, he shut the door quietly but firmly. The sound didn't lock me in, but the implication was clear. His command was the only lock that mattered. I sank onto the bed, a stiff single mattress, and finally allowed myself a single shuddering breath of relief. I was alive. I wasn't with Alpha Damon. I was in a place where I was meant to be silent and invisible. I could do that. I was an expert at being both. But as I lay there, shivering beneath a thin blanket, the silence of the woods pressed in. And I realized the crushing weight of my new reality. I had traded public humiliation for solitary fear, a cold pack for an even colder Alpha, and all for a purpose I didn't understand. I squeezed my eyes shut, focusing on my heartbeat. I will survive this. Suddenly I heard it. A small, ragged noise from the main cabin just through the thick wall. It sounded like a muffled grunt, a struggle. Then a low, desperate whimper that sounded impossibly broken. It was too animalistic to be human. My breath hitched. Was he hurt? Was someone else here? I crept to the wall, pressing my ear against the cold timber. The sound came again, a raw, suffering noise. It was the sound of a wolf in agony, fighting a pain too deep to conceal. He said he hadn't shared his territory with anyone. What is that noise? It stopped as suddenly as it began, replaced by the heavy, measured rhythm of Silas Vance's own footsteps pacing. Back and forth. Back and forth. The pacing was a caged, restless energy, and I realized with a profound chill that Silas Vance was hiding more than just his rage. He was hiding a secret. His movements slowed and then stopped right near the shared wall. I froze, my heart hammering against my ribs. I could practically feel his presence through the wood. And then a thought as clear as if he'd spoken it aloud pierced the quiet of my own mind. Why did I pay so much? She's only a liability. This curse will destroy her too. It wasn't my thought. It was his. And it was laced with a deep, self-loathing pain. I scrambled back from the wall, collapsing onto the bed, staring wide-eyed at the ceiling. A curse. He was cursed. And somehow in this remote cabin, the alpha who said I was nothing had just allowed me to hear his most private, desperate thought. My fear was still there, but now it was mixed with a flicker of terrifying, impossible curiosity. What kind of alpha was so powerful he was feared by all, yet so broken he feared himself? I closed my eyes, realizing my survival depended not just on silence, but on deciphering the complicated, dangerous man who now owned my life. I woke up to the smell of pine and the profound, oppressive silence of the forest. My body ached, not just from the cold, hard bed, but from the emotional exhaustion of the auction. The memory of Silas Vance's voice, so deep and decisive, purchasing my life, played on a loop in my head. She's only a liability. This curse will destroy her too. His thought was still chillingly clear. It was the only thing that had saved me from complete despair. It meant he was broken too. A dangerous kind of broken, but not simply cruel. A wolf fighting a cage. My first thought was to test the connection. I sat up in the bed, pulling the thin blanket around my shoulders. I focused all my mental energy, picturing Silas in the next room, and sent a deliberate, simple message into the void. If I'm awake. I waited, my breath held tight in my chest. Nothing. No sound, no pacing, no shift in the quiet hum of the cabin. My heart began to slow, disappointment mixing with a sliver of relief. Maybe it was just exhaustion. Maybe I had dreamed it, twisting the sounds of the night into a desperate narrative. Just as I decided to dismiss it, a heavy knock rattled the door of the annex. Get up, Adeline. 2 minutes. It was Silas. His voice was flat, devoid of warmth, but there was a sharp edge of impatience that hadn't been there before. I scrambled out of bed, pulling on the thin shift. The bathroom was simple. A shower, a sink, and a clean, folded towel. No mirrors. I was grateful for that. I didn't want to see the fear etched on my own face. When I opened the door, Silas was standing there, his arms crossed over his immense chest. He looked impossibly large in the small doorway, and his dark eyes swept over me in a quick, dismissive assessment. He was fully dressed, looking ready for a fight, not for a quiet morning. You took 3 minutes, he stated. I apologize, Alpha, I said instantly, dipping my head, adopting the submissive posture that had kept me alive for years in the Moonstone Pack. He didn't acknowledge the apology. He just pointed toward the main house, walking away before I could respond. I followed him into the main structure, my feet silent on the polished stone floor. The main room was vast and dominated by a large stone fireplace and a rough-hewn table covered in maps and papers. It was a workspace, not a home. On the table, beside a worn leather sheath, was a knife, a long, curved blade. It was not a kitchen knife. The metal was dull and tiny flecks of a dark, dried substance still clung to the edge. My stomach turned. It was blood. Your duties are not domestic, Silas said, watching my reaction with those cold, assessing eyes. You are an assistant, a presence, and a distraction. But first you will earn your keep. He gestured to the bloody knife and a small bowl of cleaning solutions. Clean that. Then you will copy the coordinates from this grid onto those smaller sheets. He pointed to a stack of blank paper. Neatly. No mistakes. Your failure is my inconvenience. He sat down at the head of the table, pulling out a laptop. He didn't look at me again. The message was clear. My existence was beneath his notice. I walked to the table, my heart heavy. This was my forced servitude. I wasn't just dusting. I was cleaning the evidence of his rogue life. I picked up the knife. The metal was heavy and the dried blood was stiff and rough. I focused slowly and methodically on the task. I scrubbed, careful not to let my hands slip. As I worked, I observed him. Silas was intensely focused on his laptop, his jaw clenched, the muscles in his neck tight. He had the contained energy of a storm waiting to break. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his movements were a little stiff, suggesting a lack of rest or lingering pain. The curse. I worked in silence for nearly an hour. The only sounds were the scratching of the knife on the leather strap as I finished cleaning it, and the frantic clicking of keys as Silas worked. This was my chance. I had to know if the mind link was real, not just for curiosity but for survival. If he could read me, I had to learn how to control my thoughts around him. If I could reach him even slightly, it was a weakness I could exploit for freedom. I placed the clean knife down and picked up the first map. I began the coordinate work, but my true focus was on sending another thought. I knew a neutral thought wouldn't work. It had to be emotional, raw, something to cut through his thick walls. You paid too much. Why would you spend $200,000 on someone you hate? It was a question, an accusation, and a plea, all wrapped into one silent thought. The result was instantaneous and terrifying. Silas froze. His rapid typing stopped mid-keystroke. He didn't look at me, but I saw the muscles in his back tense, coiling like springs. A low, ragged sound, a half-growl, half-gasp, escaped his lips, just like the sound I heard the night before. His massive hands clenched the edges of the laptop screen so hard I thought he might snap the device in two. He slowly, agonizingly slowly, turned his head. His eyes. They were no longer cold or distant. They were blazing with a raw, terrifying mixture of shock and incandescent rage. He looked less like an alpha and more like a captured beast, suddenly realizing its cage door was open. "Stop," he commanded, the single word ripping out of him like a bullet. I jumped, dropping the pen onto the map. "Stop what, Alpha?" I kept my voice innocent, my expression a mask of confusion. I even allowed my lip to tremble slightly. The mask. He didn't move from his seat, but his power slammed into me. It wasn't physical. It was an invisible, oppressive weight that crushed the air from my lungs and pinned me to the table. The sheer force of his alpha command made my wolf whimper in my chest. "Do not play games with me, Omega," he snarled, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "Your silence is your only sanctuary here. Do not trespass where you do not belong." Trespass, he heard the thought. "I do not understand, Alpha. I was simply copying the numbers," I whispered, maintaining the facade of a meek, frightened slave. He stood up, towering over the table. He was so close now that I could smell the wood smoke and the sharp, coppery scent of his latent wolf. "Your mind, Adeline. Quiet it. Lock it down. You keep your filth and your pitiful misery trapped inside your own head, or I swear I will make you regret the day I paid that price." His threat was palpable, deadly serious. It was a clear confirmation. He hears her thoughts. He had just performed the pivot/reveal. He wasn't just a rogue alpha, he was a rogue alpha with a secret, terrifying ability that exposed his soul, and now exposed mine. But the most crucial thing he revealed was not his power but his fear. He was terrified of my thoughts, terrified of the connection. It was linked to his curse, a flaw that made him vulnerable. He took a step back, visibly reigning in his frightening control. The air pressure dropped and I could breathe again, though my entire body was shaking. "Listen closely," he said, the ice back in his voice, colder than ever. "The only reason you are alive and not sold off to some pathetic small-time pack for menial work is because I need a shield. A face. The Council, specifically Gideon Thorne, is watching me. They want to know why the notorious rogue alpha has suddenly settled. You are my proof of domesticity. You are my fake mate." He grabbed my chin, his grip firm and impersonal, forcing me to look up into his dark eyes. "You will stay silent. You will look attentive. And you will never, ever think about my curse, my past, or my motives. Do you understand your role, Adeline? You are a walking, breathing lie. And if I hear one single emotional sound from your head, I will know you are a spy sent by the Council, and I will execute you myself. Do you swear your compliance?" His words hammered home the brutal reality of the high stakes. Death if I failed to play my role perfectly. "I swear, Alpha," I managed, the lie slipping out easily. I pulled the fear closer, letting it cloak my true resolve. He released my chin with a sharp shove. "Then go back to work. And think only of numbers, Omega. Only of numbers." I returned to the map, my hands trembling. On the outside, I was a frightened, obedient servant, meticulously copying coordinates. On the inside, my mind was racing. He hears me. He heard the question about the price. He is terrified of emotional connection. The The connection was a flaw for him, but for me, Adeline Hayes, the rejected mate, it was a shield and a weapon. He might see my fear, but he couldn't see my strategy. I would learn to control my thoughts, keep my true intentions buried, and use this terrifying intimacy to decipher his secret, understand his curse, and find the flaw in his armor. I was no longer a slave. I was a spy in the most dangerous territory imaginable, the rogue alpha's mind. I am Adeline Hayes. I survived the rejection, the mockery, and the auction. I will survive this. I thought this, but I focused every ounce of my will on keeping the thought silent, on painting the image of a blank, empty room in my head. I looked down at the coordinates, my heart beating a steady, defiant rhythm against the crushing weight of his dominance. The real work had just begun. For the next 3 days, my life was a study in stillness. I followed Silas's rule perfectly. I became a ghost in his massive, isolated cabin. I worked on the coordinates, cleaning his weapons and preparing simple meals, which he always ate alone, his silence more daunting than any rage. I became a master of mental silence. My mind was a steel trap. When I was near him, I focused on trivial, mundane things. The texture of the wood grain, the precise angle of the maps, counting my breaths. This discipline was exhausting but necessary. Every successful moment of quiet thought felt like a tiny victory in this dangerous game of hide and seek. The curse, the agonizing whimpers I heard the first night, didn't return. But his distant, cold demeanor persisted, punctuated by sharp, silent glances whenever he thought I wasn't looking. He was checking, testing my resolve. On the third afternoon, Silas paced into the annex while I was folding a coarse blanket. His movement was abrupt, startling me. "The council has eyes everywhere," he stated without preamble. "I purchased you under suspicion. Now they will send an emissary to verify my settlement. To see if the rogue alpha has suddenly gone domestic." I stopped folding. "The council? Is it Gideon Thorne?" "The same," Silas confirmed, a sneer twisting his lips. "He wants to see me fail, wants me stripped of my anonymity so he can impose their pathetic laws. We leave in an hour. We need to go into a public place where his man can observe us." "Where are we going?" "A town near the border. A place called Fairhaven. They have an outdoor market. It's the perfect spot for the rival to watch from the shadows." He finally looked at me, his gaze hard as granite. "Listen, Adeline. This is the crucial moment. You're not a slave today. You're my mate. My possession. My pride." He walked over to a small, sealed box on the shelf and pulled out a simple silver chain with a small, unadorned pendant, the only piece of jewelry in the Spartan room. "Put this on," he ordered. "It's a claim marker. It tells the world you are bound to me." My fingers trembled as I took the cold metal. A fake mate. A fake claim. But as I clasped the chain around my neck, it felt heavy, a physical weight representing the lie I was about to live. "Your mannerisms must be soft, Adeline," Silas continued, his voice low, practicing his lines. "You will walk close to me. You will meet my eyes only when I speak to you. You will look attentive and deeply secure. Do not look frightened. Fear is what they expect from my slave. Contentment is what they'll report about my mate." "What about the mind link, Alpha?" I asked, my voice barely a tremor. His jaw tightened. "I have it controlled. It only flares when I'm under extreme stress or near strong emotional turmoil. You will provide neither. Control yourself. Keep your mind empty. If I hear your pity or your fear, I will know they have turned you, and I will deal with the liability immediately." The veiled threat of execution/banishment hung heavy in the air. This was the high stakes, perform perfectly or die. The drive to Fairhaven was tense. I sat close to the door, maintaining the physical distance that felt necessary, but mentally I was practicing my role. Secure. Content. When we arrived, the town was bustling. The air was filled with the sense of fresh bread, spices, and 100 different shifters from nearby packs mingling with human townspeople. Silas got out and came around to open my door, a deliberate performance from the start. He didn't offer a hand, but he stood close, his large body a formidable barrier against the crowd. "Remember," he muttered, bending his head close so only I could hear. "Look up. Act like I am the center of your universe." I nodded, took a deep breath, and began my performance. I deliberately softened my features, aiming for a look of quiet devotion. I stayed a half step behind him, close enough for our shoulders to brush occasionally. Silas was incredible. He played the part of the alpha husband flawlessly. He was dominant, possessive, and yet subtly tender. He would place a heavy hand on the small of my back, a purely claiming gesture, steering me through the crowd. He spoke to me just twice, his voice deep and rumbling with a manufactured affection. "Do you like this flower, Adeline? It would suit your quiet beauty. Wait here, little mate. I'll get that spiced bread you like." He bought things he didn't care about, all for the benefit of the eyes he knew were on us. Every touch, every word was calculated to look like deep, established affection. The difficulty was my internal state. My heart was pounding not just from fear of exposure, but from the terrifying novelty of his touch. He was playing a role, but the sheer power of his presence was overwhelming. When his hand rested on my back, a low hum of forbidden connection resonated through me. My inner wolf, quiet and suppressed since my rejection, gave a hopeful, miserable whimper. "Control." I screamed internally, slamming the door on the feeling. "He is acting. He bought you to lie." As we moved past a fruit stall, my peripheral vision caught a movement. A tall, sharply dressed man stood leaning against a pillar, pretending to examine apples. It was Gideon Thorne's assistant, looking exactly as Silas had described, watchful and calculating. He made eye contact with Silas, a flash of challenge and suspicion in his eyes, before quickly glancing at me. This was it. The direct observation. Silas felt the scrutiny. I could feel the tension radiating off his hand on my back. He paused, deliberately slow, and then did something entirely unexpected. He turned to me, lowering his head, and gently pushed a stray strand of hair behind my ear. His fingers brushed my jawline, and his dark eyes, for the first time, held a look that was almost genuine. A deep, complex emotion that seemed to be a mirror of my own quiet pain. "Are you warm enough, my love?" he murmured, loud enough for the hidden observer to hear. His breath was warm against my ear. The intimacy of the gesture, the sudden shift from cold alpha to tender mate, was shocking. It was so real, so compelling that for a single disastrous heartbeat, my carefully constructed mental wall broke. He's handsome. Why did he reject me? Why would an alpha like this spend so much just to play a game? The thoughts were rapid, emotional, and devastatingly loud in the silent landscape of my mind. I saw the change in Silas instantly. His eyes, fixed on mine, flickered. The tenderness vanished, replaced by a sudden, intense agony. His grip tightened on my jaw, becoming painful, and I saw a vein pulse violently in his neck. "Sijti." He heard me. Asterisk. I immediately locked down my mind, picturing a stone, smooth and empty. But the damage was done. Silas was reeling. The sudden rush of deep, honest emotion, my yearning and my fear, had pierced his control, and I felt a tidal wave of his own thoughts crash into mine. "She can't be this soft. He's a trap. He saw too much. I can't let her see the rot inside me. I have to push her away." No. His external facade did not crack. The council observer would only see a man holding his mate close. But the rage in his eyes was for me alone. He bent even closer, his lips practically touching my ear. "You slipped, Adeline. Once more and I will not let you walk back to the truck," he promised, his voice low, guttural, and absolute. He released me, his hand settling back on my lower back, but now it felt like a clamp of iron. The tension between us was a screaming wire. We finished the performance, bought the bread, and walked back to the truck. The mission was a success. The council's man saw the affectionate, dominant alpha and his seemingly devoted mate. But I knew the true price. I had peeked behind the curtain of his isolation, and now my lie was cemented by a shared, terrifying secret. I was no longer just a slave. I was the one person who could expose his curse. And he would never forgive me for that. The drive back to the cabin was undertaken in absolute, soul-crushing silence. The only sounds were the hum of the engine and the thunderous, desperate thoughts crashing in my own mind. I kept my head down, staring at the silver chain around my neck. The fake claim that felt heavier than the chains they used to sell me. I could feel Silas's fury radiating off him like heat from an open furnace. He was dangerous. He was violated. The brief, raw glimpse into my inner turmoil had triggered something violent in him, something linked to his secret curse. When we finally reached the cabin, he didn't wait for me. He slammed his door, stalked inside the main house and disappeared. I knew better than to go straight to the annex. He wanted me to follow. He wanted the confrontation. I walked into the main room. Silas was standing by the stone fireplace, his back to me, staring into the cold, empty hearth. He was slowly, deliberately pulling off his heavy coat. "Come here, Adeline," he commanded, his voice barely a rasp. It was flat, exhausted, and terrifyingly cold. I walked toward him, stopping a respectful distance away. "Alpha," I whispered. He turned, and the sight of his face made me gasp. His eyes were bloodshot, his jaw was clenched so tight his teeth looked like they might shatter, and a cold sweat slicked his brow. He looked like he was fighting an invisible enemy. "Tell me what you saw," he demanded, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. "Saw, Alpha?" Kept my face blank. "I saw your excellent performance for the council's agent. I saw you purchase bread." He took a single, slow, lethal step closer. His size was overwhelming. "Don't insult my intelligence. Don't take me for a fool. You broke your silence. Your thoughts were screaming in my mind. What did you hear?" I knew lying was futile. The mind link meant the truth was already exposed. My only option was radical honesty, but framed as an appeal to his own self-preservation. "I heard your anger, Alpha," I said, keeping my tone quiet and steady, showing only surface fear, not the crippling terror beneath. "I heard your control slip just for a moment. I heard you think about your curse." The word hung between us, the true name of his devastating secret. Silas recoiled as if struck. The shock was instantaneous, wiping the rage from his face and replacing it with pure, naked vulnerability. A terrifying look for a dominant alpha. "The lie is over, Adeline," he said, rubbing his temple with a massive hand. "The minute I hear emotion from you, the minute I hear a question about my motives, my past, or the truth of my identity, the curse flares. It's a violation. It burns." He dropped his hand and his eyes fixed on mine. "It's not just a mind link, Adeline. It's a truth link. The deeper your emotional intensity, the more of my defenses it bypasses. It reveals the rot. And the rot." He trailed off, unable to voice it. "The rot is that you are hiding something that prevents you from having a mate," I finished for him quietly. "You bought me not just to deceive the council, but to test if a true mate bond could ever be possible. You chose someone rejected because you thought she'd be too broken to trigger the curse." He stared at me, his eyes wide. I had just articulated his deepest fear, his hero's flaw, which he had taken to the grave. A tremor went through his body and I braced myself, expecting a brutal lash of anger. Instead, a wave of profound, aching sadness washed over me. It wasn't my sadness. It was his. "I cannot be near her. It hurts too much. She's my anchor, but she will be my undoing. I will destroy her with this thing inside me." The thought was loud, clear, and devastatingly tender. He didn't hate me. He was terrified of destroying me. I took a step closer, breaking the sacred rule of distance. "You are not cursed, Alpha. You are in pain. And whatever this rot is, it's not a reason to kill yourself with isolation." Silas roared, a sound that finally broke the dam of his control. It wasn't the roar of a predator but of an animal caught in a snare. "I can't shift," he bellowed, the truth ripping out of him like tearing paper. "I can't shift fully. When I try, I don't turn into a wolf. I turn into a nightmare. It's a blood sickness. A fey bargain curse on my lineage. It's why I live alone. It's why I am a rogue alpha. If a mate were truly bound to me, my wolf would demand to claim her, and the moment I tried, the curse would take us both. I would crush her body and break her mind into 1,000 pieces." He took a desperate step back, raising his hands as if the disease were physically clinging to him. "The mind link. It means you are the pivot/reveal. You're my true mate, Adeline. The second mate the moon goddess gave me after the failure of the first bond. And you are the final, irresistible temptation the curse will use to kill me." The silence returned, but this time, it was filled with the deafening sound of a desperate heart beating against a terrible destiny. I understood everything now. His colossal price, his brutal distance, his self-loathing. He hadn't bought a slave. He had bought a death sentence he was trying to postpone. I looked at the largest, most formidable man I had ever known, reduced to trembling before a fate he couldn't outrun. And in that moment my fear, my original selfish fear of being a servant, vanished, replaced by a deep, fierce, protective certainty. "I am not afraid of your truth," I said, my voice strong, steady, and utterly sincere. I was a rejected mate. I know what it feels like to be flawed, unwanted, and disposable. But I am not disposable, and neither are you. I held out my hand, a gesture of absolute vulnerability. You need a fake mate to survive the council's watch. I need a place to hide from the council's grasp. We are bound by desperation. If the mind link is the price of that bond, then we will learn to live with it. I will keep my mind empty for you, Alpha. But you will stop thinking of yourself as a monster. Silas stared at my outstretched hand, his breath coming in ragged hitches. His dark eyes darted between my face and my small, determined hand. He was terrified to touch me, terrified of the truth he'd just revealed, and terrified of the sheer raw purity of my acceptance. He didn't take my hand. Instead, he took another step back, fighting the connection, fighting me. I will not be saved, he growled, turning back to the empty fireplace. You are still my property, Adeline. But now you are a liability with dangerous knowledge. We maintain the facade. You will control your mind. I will control my curse. Now go. I have business to attend to. Don't ever step into my physical space without permission again. It was a rejection not of me but of the hope I represented. It was the deepest part of his hero's flaw/misconception. His belief that he was unworthy of love or healing. I retracted my hand slowly, but my resolve did not falter. He had given me the truth. And in truth there was power. Yes, Alpha, I said, turning and walking back to the annex. As I closed the door, I placed my hands on the cold wood and sent a single, silent, focused thought directly to his retreating back. I made sure to wrap it in absolute sincerity, forcing the truth link to trigger. You don't want me to fear you, Silas. But your rejection of my help is the only thing that truly terrifies me. I didn't wait for a response. I ran the tap in the sink, scrubbing the scent of the market and the lye off my hands, knowing that while he had refused my hand, I had just planted a seed of emotional entanglement in his guarded, cursed soul. The game had just changed, from survival to salvation. The confession had changed everything, yet nothing at all. Silas and I still occupied the same remote, dangerous space, but the atmosphere was now charged thick with unspoken truths. His physical distance became a weapon against the terrifying intimacy of the mind link. He was colder than ever, his movements sharp, his commands clipped. He avoided looking at me, keeping his focus fiercely locked on his work. The endless maps, the strange communications he received through a satellite phone, and the constant cleaning of his weapons. I knew he was deliberately building walls, desperately trying to shut out the flicker of connection he knew existed. My days settled into a rigorous routine of silent servitude. I cooked simple meals, always leaving his portion at the end of the long table, then retreated to my annex to eat alone. I copied coordinates, organized his complex intelligence notes, and cleaned the cabin, doing all of it while maintaining a mental state of utter neutrality. I focused on colors, shapes, the rhythmic sound of sweeping. I was training my mind like a muscle, learning to shield my heart. But the silence was deceptive. The physical proximity, now laced with the knowledge of our mate bond and his curse, was excruciating. One rainy afternoon I was meticulously polishing a heavy, curved axe, a brutal weapon, at the edge of the main table. Silas was a few feet away, leaning over a map, his large, scarred hand tracing a route. My eyes drifted to his hand. I noticed a thin, jagged scar running across his wrist, partially hidden by the sleeve of his thick, dark shirt. I wondered instantly, was that from a fight? Or was it from the curse? Before I could lock it down, the thought, simple and curious, flashed into the truth link. Silas flinched so violently the table shuddered. He snatched his hand back, gripping the edge of the table until his knuckles turned white. Adeline. His voice was a raw, low snarl. I dropped the polishing cloth, instantly adopting the meek posture. I apologize, Alpha. I focused on the scar. Don't speak of it, he hissed, turning his back to me. Don't look at it. Don't think of it. It is not your concern. The moment was taut with unspoken threat. But beneath his anger, I felt the familiar achy wave of his self-loathing. She sees the evidence of the sickness. She sees the brokenness. My discipline was tested, but I fought back the pity. Pity was a direct path to his fury. Instead, I focused on the task, wiping the axe blade slowly, projecting nothing but the physical act of cleaning metal. He paced for a minute, fighting his inner battle. Then he turned back, his expression a mask of cold resolve. "The silence is not working," he stated, his voice tight. "The closer we are, the more your presence destabilizes my control. I can't risk another slip. The council's man is gone, but that does not mean they have stopped watching. They will send Gideon Thorne next if they are suspicious." He pointed to a stack of complex, coded documents. "This is a new shipment plan. Highly sensitive. You will organize these. You will be my intelligence officer for the night. We will work side by side. I need to know if this proximity, this necessary, emotionally charged necessity, is something we can weaponize or if it will simply destroy us." This was a massive shift. He was forcing an almost unbearable intimacy, not for affection but for survival. He pulled up a second chair at the table directly opposite him. The table that had felt miles wide now seemed barely a foot across. For the next 6 hours we worked. I became Adeline, the strategic mind, focusing on the coordinates, the dates, the coded warnings. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. Every few minutes I would raise my eyes to ask a simple technical question. "Alpha, is Sector 7 Delta compromised or secure?" He answered in clipped, concise sentences. But the close proximity allowed the truth link to hum constantly, a low frequency beneath our focused work. I heard his thoughts not as distinct words, but as a constant emotional undertone. "Danger. This contact is necessary. She is smart. She understands the pattern. Her hands are small but steady. She is not afraid of the blade. Why isn't she afraid of me?" I kept my own mind a blank canvas, but the intensity of his emotional overflow was nearly crippling. He was fighting his wolf, the cursed part of him, which screamed a forbidden, dangerous mix of dominance, need and devastating protection for his mate. Around midnight a sharp, cold wind rattled the window, causing the fire in the hearth to spit and flicker. I shivered, pulling the thin shift closer around my shoulders. Immediately, a thought clear and commanding flared in the link. "She's cold. Why is she wearing that ridiculous fabric?" Before the thought had faded, Silas stood up without a word. He walked to a cupboard, pulled out a large woolen blanket and tossed it onto the table between us. "Use it," he ordered, his voice gruff, his face averted. "I need your mind sharp, not chilled." It was a small kindness wrapped in the packaging of a cold command. I didn't thank him. That would be too emotional. I simply wrapped the blanket around myself. It was heavy, warm, and smelled powerfully of him. Wood smoke, cold air, and the deep primal scent of an alpha wolf. The warmth was a relief, but it only heightened the tension. Now, separated by the small stretch of table wearing his scent, we felt intensely close. An hour later, I finished decoding a particularly complex sequence of numbers. "Alpha," I said, pointing to the final decryption, "this is not a shipment. This is a person. A location for extraction. And the code name is the Queen." Silas's head snapped up. He snatched the paper, his eyes scanning the numbers. His breath hitched. "They found her," he muttered, his deep voice heavy with dread. "They found my mother. Gideon Thorne has her. He's using her to draw me out." My mind raced. His mother, the Queen, a human perhaps who held the key to his fake-cursed lineage. This was the ultimate price/high stakes, not his life but his family's freedom. He pushed back from the table, his chair scraping loudly on the stone floor. He stood, his immense body trembling with a mixture of terror and lethal resolve. "I have to move," he announced, grabbing his heaviest coat. "I have to find her before they transport her to council territory. They will use her loss of inheritance/kingdom against me to force my surrender." He turned to me, his dark eyes ablaze. The plan had changed, and the fake mate was now a critical, dangerous liability. "You stay here, Adeline. Do not leave the annex. Do not open the door for anyone but me. I don't know when I will return. If Gideon Thorne comes here, he will take you, and I can't risk him learning my secrets." "I know your secrets, Alpha," I pointed out quietly, standing up. "And I know your codes. I can help. I can track the potential transport routes. I can be the eyes you leave behind." He looked at me, fury fighting with necessity in his eyes. He didn't want the risk, but he knew the truth. I was the only mind he trusted to be truly empty of betrayal. He finally conceded with a sharp, dangerous nod. "You will use the satellite phone. You will use the coordinates we tracked. If you hear anything on the encrypted channels, You tell me the moment I call you. But Adeline, hear my final command. If I don't return by the day after tomorrow, you are to pack the truck, take the cash from the floor safe and run away. Do not try to save me. Save yourself. He was giving me the one thing I desperately wanted, a chance at freedom, but it was conditional on his failure. He walked to the door, his shadow looming large in the light of the dying fire. Before he left, he paused and his mind link flared, a desperate surge of pure, powerful dominance, the last vestige of his alpha control. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this for my mother. Do not think of me. Only of survival. And then he was gone, leaving the cabin silent, except for the frantic hammering of my own heart. I pulled the heavy, scented blanket tighter around me, sat back down at the table and looked at the maps. I was alone but armed with his secrets, wearing his claim and holding the weight of his mother's fate, and his cursed life, in my hands. I would not run. I would save the Queen. The silence of the cabin after Silas left was a scream. It felt vast and empty, no longer filled with the low hum of his repressed thoughts, only the frantic beating of my own heart. I sat at the large table, his heavy, scented blanket still wrapped around me, staring at the satellite phone and the stack of cryptic maps. He told me to run. That was the last desperate command of a powerful man who believed he was too broken to be saved. But running meant survival, and I was done merely surviving. I wanted to fight. I wanted to save the one man who, even with a curse raging inside him, had paid my price and given me back a sliver of my dignity. I didn't waste a second. I organized the documents not for his return but for his immediate need. I deduced the most likely route the council would take to move the Queen, using the geographical points on the maps. It wasn't the main highway. It was an old, disused logging trail that cut through the deep woods, a route only a rogue alpha would know. I grabbed the satellite phone, punching in the complicated sequence Silas had shown me, connecting to his encrypted network. I listened intently, straining to hear any chatter, any mention of the extraction. I worked the phone for hours, the adrenaline keeping me sharp and focused. Around midday I heard it, a garbled, short burst of communication on a frequency Silas had marked, emergency only. I pressed the recording function and listened back, my blood turning to ice. Package is secure. Thorn is inbound. Estimated arrival at drop point C in 4 hours. Prepare the transfer. Drop point C. I scrambled back to the map, my fingers flying. Drop point C was exactly where the old logging trail met a main council road. It was their ambush point. They weren't moving his mother. They were setting a trap. They were waiting for Silas to rush in, feral and desperate. I had to warn him. But I couldn't call him directly. It was too risky. I had to use the one weapon he'd given me, the one he feared. The truth link. I closed my eyes, picturing Silas's intense, dark gaze. I pushed everything into the mental connection, not just words but the cold certainty of the danger. Silas. Drop point C is compromised. Gideon Thorne is inbound. It is an ambush for you. I felt the connection, a sharp, momentary burning sensation behind my eyes, confirming the message was sent. I knew he had received it. His mind, even under pressure, was too dominant to miss a burst of pure vital information. I barely had time to put the phone down when a loud, aggressive knocking reverberated through the stone cabin. My stomach dropped. I looked at the clock. It was too soon for Silas. I crept to the window and looked out. A large black sedan, the kind favored by pack enforcers, was parked outside. Standing on the porch, his face set in a look of cold, predatory determination, was Gideon Thorne. The antagonist had arrived. I knew what he wanted. He wanted to confirm his suspicions. He wanted to find evidence of Silas's illegal activities and use me, the rejected mate, as his informant. I walked to the door, took a deep breath and unlatched the heavy deadbolt. Adeline Hayes. Gideon greeted me, stepping inside without permission. He was imposing but lacked the coiled, organic danger of Silas. He was power by title, not by nature. How lovely to see the domestic life you've made for yourself. He sneered, his eyes sweeping across the room. The maps, the clean weapons, the scattered documents I couldn't hide. Where is the rogue alpha? I adopted my persona, the mask of the quiet, devoted mate. Alpha Vance is on a supply run, Councilman Thorne. He should return by evening. A supply run, Gideon scoffed. And you, a known disgraced Omega, are left alone in the heart of the most wanted rogue territory? You must be very trusted. He walked toward the table, his fingers trailing across the maps. I froze, waiting. He saw the decoded papers, the fresh ink, the precise handwriting. He knew this wasn't the work of a frightened slave. You're smarter than you look, Adeline, he murmured, picking up one of the tracking sheets. You've been helping him. You, a former beta daughter, now running codes for a traitor. Pathetic. I am under my alpha's claim, I stated clearly, keeping my voice level. My service is to him as is my obedience. He slammed the paper down, turning back to me with sudden rage. Obedience? You were rejected. You were sold. Your pack cast you out because you are worthless. This rogue will cast you out the minute his curse breaks free. Don't you want vengeance? Don't you want to see the council crush the man who is keeping you a prisoner? This was the trap. The council wanted me to betray Silas, to confirm their suspicion of his curse and his operation. I looked directly into his eyes, refusing to flinch. I let my inner thoughts remain empty, but I allowed a sliver of genuine resentment to show on my face. Not resentment toward Silas, but toward the council's brutality. Alpha Vance saved me from Alpha Damon, I said simply. He paid $200,000 for my life. That is more respect than the council ever showed me when they stripped me of my titles and sold me like cattle. I am loyal to the one who claimed me. Gideon laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. Loyalty is cheap when it's coerced. But let's see how loyal you are when faced with a true choice. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, ornate silver locket on a chain. My breath hitched. It was my mother's locket, the one she'd worn every day until the council took it after the rejection. Your mother is currently in a holding cell, awaiting trial for aiding a criminal, Gideon explained, his eyes glittering with triumph. If you help me expose Vance, if you tell me where he went or what that drop point C on the map means, I will release your mother and give you a full pardon. You will be reinstated to a minor pack and given protection. You will get your dignity back. He dangled the necklace. Or you can stay silent and watch the rogue Alpha walk into my trap, leading to his execution and the banishment of your mother, whom you will never see again. The choice is yours, Adeline. Dignity and family, or a rogue's cursed end. The air became heavy with the weight of the price/high stakes. My hands curled into fists behind my back. I stared at the silver locket, the symbol of the life I'd lost, the family I missed. But I remembered the feel of Silas's hand on my back, the manufactured tenderness that felt so devastatingly real, and the fear in his voice when he confessed his curse. He was fighting for his mother. I would fight for him. You want my word that Alpha Vance is on his way to drop point C, I said, my voice low but firm. Gideon's face lit up. Yes. Tell me where he is and the council will be grateful. I shook my head slowly. I can't. Because he's not going there. Gideon frowned. What are you talking about? Alpha Vance told me that drop point C was a perfect place for an ambush. I lied, the words coming out smooth and practiced. He tracked your movements hours ago. He went to the alternative route, the old mining road. He'll be there now, freeing his mother, while you wait here to ambush an empty trail. The look on Gideon's face was pure, unadulterated shock, then furious betrayal. Why? He is a brute. He is predictable. He is a rogue Alpha, I corrected, a cold certainty settling in my bones. And he is always 2 steps ahead of the council. If you want to catch him, you need to leave now and head west toward the mining district. If you wait here, you will lose everything. Gideon's confidence buckled. He looked at the maps, his mind racing through the options. He couldn't risk the alternative route being the correct one, not when his prize was a queen. He glared at me, his eyes promising retribution. You have made a terrible enemy today, Adeline. If I find you have lied, I will personally ensure your mother's permanent banishment and your prolonged suffering. He turned and bolted from the cabin, leaving the door wide open. His car roared to life, tires spinning as he raced away toward the mining district. The completely wrong direction. I collapsed against the table, my legs weak. I had done it. I had saved them. I ran to the satellite phone, keying in the emergency code, transmitting a single vital message to the frequency I knew only Silas would check. West clear. Threat diverted. My job was done. Now I was a walking target. I looked at the floor safe where Silas had told me to get the cash and run away. I could leave now. I had the time. But I didn't move. I walked instead to the main window, waiting, shivering in the silent cabin, wrapped in his blanket, listening to the vast empty woods for the sound of his powerful return. I didn't know how long I waited. Hours bled into one another in the dim light of the cabin. The scent of Silas's coat around me was my only anchor against the terror that clawed at my resolve. I had disobeyed his direct command not by running but by fighting for him. If he failed, I was ruined. If he returned, he might be angrier at my defiance than grateful for the warning. Then I heard it, the low, heavy rumble of the black truck. I ran to the door, throwing it open just as he killed the engine. Silas stepped out, and the sight of him made me weak with relief. He was covered in dirt and exhaustion, his clothes torn, but he was whole. And he was not alone. Standing beside him, looking frail but utterly regal, was a woman who could only be the queen, his mother. She had Silas's piercing dark eyes, but they were softened by the relief of freedom. "Adeline," Silas said, his voice rough with fatigue. He didn't look at me fully, focusing instead on ushering his mother toward the cabin. "Get her settled in the annex. Now." His mother smiled warmly at me. "You must be Adeline." "Thank you, dear. I can already tell you've been a comfort to my boy." I led her into the annex where she collapsed on the bed, murmuring thanks. I gave her water and a clean towel, then returned to the main room. Silas was standing exactly where I'd left him, by the fireplace. His large body was vibrating with suppressed energy, and his eyes, usually cold, were burning with a terrifying intensity. "You sent the message," he stated, not a question but a condemnation. "You walked into a trap, Alpha." "Gideon Thorne had an ambush set at drop point C," I confirmed, standing my ground. "I lied to him. I sent him toward the mining district. I bought you the time you needed." "You violated my command," he growled, taking a predatory step toward me. "I told you to run. You risked everything. If the council had found you here, you would have been tortured, and you would have given up my mother's location." "No," I whispered, the defiance in my heart burning away the fear. "I would have held it, because I was never afraid of Gideon Thorne's cruelty. I was only afraid of your loneliness. You told me the curse was activated by emotion. I knew you needed clean intelligence, not despair. My mind was empty of all but facts, Alpha. I saved you." He stopped inches from me. He didn't touch me, but the sheer force of his presence was overwhelming. His breathing was ragged. I saw the struggle waging in his eyes, the raging broken wolf fighting the man who knew he owed me everything. "The truth is not always a mercy, Adeline," he said, his voice cracking. "The moment I received your signal, I knew it was truth. And the curse flared. It was agonizing. I wanted to turn and slaughter every soul in my path." He reached a trembling hand out, grasping the silver chain around my neck. "The fake claim. You are my mate," he ground out, the words raw with pain and realization. "The curse is activated by the rejection of the bond. My father was cursed because he failed to claim my mother fully. I am cursed because I tried to deny you. Every time I reject your truth, your emotion, or your help, the rot grows." He looked into my eyes, and for the first time I saw no coldness, only a devastating surrender. The Fae curse wasn't about blood. It was about the Alpha's flaw, denying his destined mate. The only way to stop it is to accept it. To accept you. He pulled the fake silver chain off my neck and threw it into the fireplace. Then his large, scarred hands cupped my face. He leaned in, his gaze fierce and possessive. "I am a rogue, Adeline. Cursed, wanted, and dangerous. But I will not reject you again. I will not deny the truth you force me to see." And then he claimed me. His kiss was fierce, desperate, and utterly consuming. It was not gentle. It was a hungry, brutal claiming, the release of years of suppression and pain. The moment his lips met mine, a blinding flash of energy, sharp and white-hot, shot through my body. The silver light felt like cleansing fire, burning away the lingering ache of my first rejection, burning away the remnants of his curse. I leaned into him, answering his demand with all the bottled-up resilience and devotion I possessed. I wasn't just claiming a mate, I was accepting a destiny. He pulled back, his eyes searching mine. The terrifying intensity was still there, but now it was mixed with a deep, consuming wonder. "The curse. It's quiet," he whispered, a sound of profound shock. "The fear is gone. You cleansed it, little mate. You are my healing." He wrapped his arms around me, pulling me against his massive, warm chest, holding me with a crushing tenderness that promised safety for the first time in my life. "I paid the highest price for you, Adeline Hayes," he murmured into my hair. "But you, my truth-teller, were worth every single coin. The Council and Gideon Thorne will still hunt us, but now they hunt too. You are no longer a servant, a fake, or a shield. You are my queen. And we will build our kingdom of rogues together." I closed my eyes, inhaling the comforting primal scent of my alpha. The rejected mate was claimed, the curse was quieted, and the rogue alpha finally had a mate to fight for and a purpose to heal. My servitude was over. My life of dangerous freedom had just begun. This is the end of Adeline and Silas's story for now. I hope you enjoyed the journey from the chilling auction to the final, emotional claim. Tell me in the comments, which part of the story did you find most intriguing? Was it the moment Silas revealed he could hear Adeline's thoughts? Or the terrifying confrontation with Gideon Thorne where Adeline chose to lie for Silas? Do you think Adeline made the right choice by choosing the cursed rogue alpha over the chance to run and secure her mother's freedom? Please like and subscribe. Your subscription is a massive support for me, and it truly means the world as my channel is still young and trying to grow. See you in the next interesting story.